All right. When we started Perek Zayin, the 7th chapter, we started by examining a machlokus between Rav and Shmuel as to whether Mashiach would come if there were no tshuva. And Shmuel argued with Rav and said it's enough for the mourner to be in his mourning. And Rashi said it's either, why are you telling the people that are in mourning, meaning the Jewish people, that it's going to be so bad? Or perhaps, God is mourning over the destruction, and eventually he is going to get up from his mourning and end the exile. The Gemara then relates this back to a debate between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. And we saw that there is, in the second section in the chapter, that there is tshuva klalit and tshuva pratit. There is the return of the entire Jewish people to Eretz Yisrael, and there is each individual's return to God, and that these are two different things. We also saw in terms of the halacha that in the end, Rabbi Eliezer was quiet in the face of Rabbi Yoshua's arguments, and that therefore the halacha follows Rabbi Yehoshua, that the Jews will be redeemed even if they did not do tshuva. Then, if we have this idea that there will be a redemption without tshuva, the Gemara goes, how do we come to recognize this? V'amar Rabbi Abba, and Rabbi Abba says, Ein lecha ketz megula mizeh. There is no greater sign of the coming end more than this. Ve'atem harei Yisrael, and now you mountains of Israel, an peichem titnu, your branches you should give, ufrichem tisu, that they may hold up the fruit, lami Yisrael, for my people Israel, ki karvo lavo, because soon they are going to come. It's a pasuk in Yechezkel. So, why do we need this? We need this sign so that we're able to recognize the redemption, even if we haven't done tshuva. If everyone's done tshuva, we'll see a change in the nature of Klal Yisrael, which would be the sign that redemption is going to immediately occur. Whereas if it's occurring without the tshuva of each individual in Klal Yisrael to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then we need to know what are the indicators of the coming redemption. We, in the next section, Zachu Achi Shena, that if Klal Yisrael has merit, the redemption will come quickly, and if not, it will come in its time. We discussed a series of psukim and the commentaries on them about this idea that Geula can come in two ways, either through each individual in Klal Yisrael returning to God, or when the final time comes. We stopped in the middle of this perek, where there was a shift from psukim that deal from Navi and Ksuvim, from the later parts of the Bible, to a very interesting drasha made by Rabbeinu Bechaye. It's on the end of Vayikra, where it talks about the redemption of a slave. It's source 8 in our sheet, Vayikra Chaf Aleph, Pesukim Mem Zayin to Nun Hey. V'ki tasig yad ger v'toshav imach, umach achicha imo. And it will be when someone becomes poor, downtrodden, v'nimkar leger toshav imach, and he will be sold to someone who is dwelling with you, or la'kor mishpachas ger, or to be uprooted from this family. Achrei nimkar geula tiye lo. After he is sold, he will have a redemption. Echad me'achav yigalenu. One of his brethren can redeem him, or dodo, or vendodo. His uncle or his cousin, yigalenu, can redeem him, or mishar b'saro mimishpachto yigalenu, or any other relative of his flesh from his family can redeem him, or hisigat yado v'nigal, or if he himself is able to acquire the money, then he may redeem himself. Vimlo yigael be'ele, and if he is not redeemed in any of these ways, v'yotze b'shnat yovel, he will go out in the Jubilee year, hu uvanav imo, he and his brethren with him. Ki li v'nei Yisrael avadim, because the children of Israel are my slaves, avadaihim, they are the slaves to me. Asher hotzeiti otam me'eretz Mitzrayim, I brought them out of the land of Egypt. Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I am the Lord your God. So we see from here that when someone sells themselves as a slave, that they may be redeemed by a relative or by themselves and go out at any time, or if failing that, when the Jubilee year comes, when the appointed times comes, that they go free. Rabbeinu Bechaye writes upon this, Ki geula tului b'tshuva. We see from here that this is the paradigm for redemption. Source 8. That redemption is dependent upon repentance. The repentance would be the return of the money that was paid to purchase the slave. Fa'afim lo yasu tshuva, and even if they don't do tshuva, they don't return the money, or they don't return to God, i'afshar lehitacher mizman haketz. Nonetheless, it would be impossible to delay this more than the miketz hakatzuf, from the set time, ubigia tor haketz, and when the line reaches the end, hakatzuf, that was predetermined, lo yishar liYisrael shum avdut bilti avodat Hashem yitbarach. There will remain no enslavement of the Jewish people other than their service to Hashem yitbarach, God, he should be blessed. Va'amar, and I say, ve'im lo yigael be'ele, if they will not be redeemed in these things, she'im lo yigael al yedei tshuva b'shnot hagalut ha'elu, if they are not redeemed through each individual person's tshuva in these years of exile, v'yatza b'shnas hayovel hu v'navimo, he will go out in the Jubilee, he and his sons with him. Kolomar, that is to say, shelo yitacher zman ha'geula min haketz hakatzuv ve'elech, that in no circumstance will the redemption be delayed longer than the set time. This is the opinion that we saw from Rabbi Yoshua in the Gemara at the end of Sanhedrin, that whether they do tshuva or whether they don't do tshuva, when this time comes, they will be redeemed. The only issue was whether they could be redeemed before that time or not, that if they all did tshuva, they would be. Rabbeinu Bechaye talks about this idea similarly in his Sefer HaKemach, literally the barrel of flour, in the end of the entry on redemption. The Yadua l'kol mevin, and it is known to anyone with understanding, ki gulatenu zeh, that our redemption from this exile, natnuvo shlosha kitzim k'inyan galut Mitzrayim, there were 3 end times to it, just like there were in the Egyptian exile. That's the end of his statement there. However, in his commentary on Shemot, Perek Yud Beit Pasuk Mem, source 11 in our sheets, we find that he writes, Matzinu begulat Mitzrayim gimel ketzim dehem. We find in terms of the redemption from Egypt that there were 3 end times, and these are those. Tav Shana, 400 years. Tav Lamed Shama, 430 years. Radu Shana, 210 years. Vaita hasiba me'et HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shahaita gulat Mitzrayim al gimel ketzim. And the reason that the redemption from Egypt had 3 times was caused by God, kedei lachazik yadenu harafot begalutenu zeh, to strengthen our hands that are weakened in this exile, meaning to give us hope that relatively soon the redemption could come. Shelo nemar avdati kvatenu nigzaranu lanu, so that we do not say all hope is lost, it has been decreed against us, and meaning to remain in exile forever. Ki mi'acher shnitbarer lanu ki gimel ketzim elu shel geulat Mitzrayim shloshtam hayu emet, because when it was known to us that there were these 3 times for the redemption from Egypt, and all 3 of them were true. Ken aleinu lahamin ki gimel ketzim v'orsham Daniel begulatenu hatida kulam emes. So too, the 3 end times that are explicit in Daniel, even though we can't understand what they are, what they mean, how to calculate what dates those would be, nonetheless, they're stated there that there are 3 dates for our future exile. All of those dates are true. The al ken nigzaru kan v'kan gimel kitzim. In both cases, in the redemption from our exile and in the redemption from the exile in Egypt, there were 3 end times. Shim yizku nigalim b'rishon. If the Jews would have merit, they would be redeemed in the first of these times. Ve'im lo yizku b'rishon yizku b'sheni. If they did not merit the second, they would merit. If they did not merit the first, they would merit the second. Ve'im lo yizku b'sheni yizku b'shlishi. And if they did merit the second, they would merit the third. And it is impossible for the redemption to be delayed farther than the 3rd time. And this is what Rabbeinu Chananel wrote. Rabbeinu Chananel was one of the earliest of the Rishonim, and he was one of 4 prisoners who was redeemed by Spanish Jewry from pirates and brought Talmudic study to Spain. He wrote a running commentary on the Talmud, and Rabbeinu Bachai is saying this is the comment, this is the explanation that Rabbeinu Chananel gave. However, having said that, there is another place in the Kadvik Kemach, in the first parak on Geula, instead of at the very end of the 3rd parak of Geula, where it seems that Rabbeinu Bachai is saying that redemption is dependent only upon tshuva. And Rabbeinu Bachai writes as follows, source 12, Umi me'akev she'ein anu nigalim, and who is preventing us from being redeemed? Ein shum davar me'akev ela tshuva. Nothing is preventing the redemption other than repentance. Im tebayon, bayu. If you desire it, you will make it happen. Kolomar, im atem mevakshim lehigael. If you ask to be redeemed, bikshu rachamim lefanav. Ask for mercy before God. Veshuvu min hagaliyot, and return from your exile. Uvo li Yerushalayim, and come to Yerushalayim. Lamadnu haktuv bekan she'gula tulip b'tshuva. We see from here that the redemption is dependent upon tshuva. Now, we see from this a very interesting thing. He does not seem to be talking about the same type of tshuva here as he talked about in the other places. The other places he seems to be talking about a tshuva to God. Here he's talking about a tshuva to Eretz Yisrael, a return to Eretz Yisrael. And in fact, this is the exact idea that we saw from Rav Alkalai at the very beginning of this parak, that there are 2 types of tshuva. There's an individual tshuva to God, where each individual has to return and repair his own relationship with God, and there's a national return to the national homeland in Eretz Yisrael. And this is what we've already seen from the Kuzari in the 5th parak, Siman Chaf Zayin. Ki Yerushalayim amnam tibaneh, Jerusalem will be built. Kishiyichsefu Yisrael la tachlis hakosef, when the Jewish people desire it with the ultimate desire. Ad yechanenu avaneha, until they desire her stones, va'ofra, and her dirt. So we see that the return of Am Yisrael to Eretz Yisrael, of which Jerusalem is at the top, will happen when Klal Yisrael wishes to return. It's the desire of Klal Yisrael to return that creates the change, creates the possibility of this kind of redemption. In fact, we see this also in Rav Yosef Albo in Sefer Ikrim. Sefer Ikrim is a philosophical work where Rav Yosef Albo works out the basics of Jewish philosophy and belief. There is a famous debate between him and the Rambam. The Rambam says there are 13 principles of faith. Rav Yosef Albo does not disagree with any of those 13 principles. However, he says they are subsets of 3 greater principles. That's beyond their scope now, but Rav Yosef Albo in Sefer Ikrim, Dalet Memchet, writes as follows. V'ken be'er ze David ala tikva klalit gamken. And David HaMelech explained this desire in a general way. Amar, he said, Yachel Yisrael el Hashem, when God desires, moves, begins to move toward God, ki im Hashem chesed v'arbei mofadus, because with God is the mercy, and he is great to redeem. Rotzelomar, that is to say, al tityashu milikvot el Hashem, b'sibat rov ha'avonot. Do not give up, abandon, lose hope for God because of our many sins. Ki einatem atidim lige'el mitzad zechuyotechem. Because in the end, you, the Jewish people, will not be redeemed because of their merits. Ki lo yaspiku lekach. The merit will not be enough to cause the redemption. Aval geula ma'amkei hatzarot, the redemption from all the deep sufferings, tiyeh al tzad chesed levad, will be from the mercy of God alone. Ulezei roi la'achel el Hashem yitbarach, bilvad v'lo l'zulato. And for this, it is fit to pray to God alone and to no other. Ki im Hashem chesed, because with God is the mercy. Ve'em nimtza min hanimtzaim sheyuchal lasot chesed zulato. And nothing is capable of doing kindness without a partnership with God in some way, without God's help. Va'af im yirbu ha'avonot, and even if there are many sins, v'arbei mofadut, God is great to redeem. Ki iyavshar sheyeh koach hachote lachto yoter gedol mikoach Hashem yitbarach limchol. It is impossible that the ability of a person to sin is greater than the ability of God to forgive the sin. Imken, if so, v'hu yiftei et Yisrael mikol avonotav, that he will redeem Israel from all her sins. V'lezei ma shetalu raboseinu zichronam levracha hageula haklalit bizman or bezuchut. And this is what our rabbis said, that the redemption, the general redemption, is dependent upon either the time or the merit. Amru, they said, Ani Hashem bi'ita achishena. He again quotes this famous pasuk from Yeshayahu, Perek Samek, pasuk Chaf Beis. Zachu, if they have merit, achishena, I will bring the redemption sooner. Lo zachu, if they fail to merit, bi'ita, the redemption will come in its time. The Dan Yitzhak Abarbanel in Mashmiya Yeshua, Mivaser Tov Hashlishi, the third section, Nevuah Yud, the 10th prophecy, also talks about the fact that the redemption is not necessarily dependent upon tshuva. And it's important to remember Rabbeinu Hananel's life, or Rabbeinu, the Abarbanel's life story. He was offered by Ferdinand and Isabella to be allowed to stay in Spain, and he said that he was not interested in that if his brethren could not be in Spain. He was their banker before the Jewish exile from Spain. He fled to Portugal in the end. His youngest child was taken by the Portuguese, and he wasn't allowed to take him out with him when he left Portugal for Italy. V'nisan hasiba begu'ulatam ba'omru. And the reason that they gave for our redemption, as they said, Kiko Amar Hashem, thus says God, Chinam nimkartem v'lo bekesef tiga'elu. For nothing you were sold, and it is not with silver, not with money that you will be redeemed. This is, of course, playing back to the parsha that we read from Vayikra earlier about a slave being redeemed by a relative, could pay the sale price minus the years worked. Ufashata ketuv moreh, and the simple meaning of the pasuk teaches us, Im sha'amar shahayu kol kach ra'im v'chata'im shnimkaru chinam. If we were so evil and sinning that we were sold for nothing, kamo eved hapachot ve'ra'ah shitnehu adono below mechir kedei lahotzio mirshuto. Like a very bad slave who his master gives him away just to get him out of his control. There is a story in the Gemara about one of the Amoraim who owns a slave who's a drunkard, and he can't, no matter how much you whip him, he will never do any work. All he does is he does these funny dances so people will give him money so that he can buy more liquor to get drunk with. All sorts of interesting things surrounding him, but that's what we're talking about. It's talking about a slave that only costs you money. You never get anything of value out of him. If we are that bad, v'gam ken lo yigalenu mitoch tshuva u'masim tovim shiasu. They will not be redeemed from their repentance and their good deeds that they will do. Ki ra'ah hanavi shiavor kol zman ha'efsharut. Because the prophets saw that all of the time would pass, v'lo nigalim elu be'itam, and that they would only be redeemed in the end in their time. V'al zeh amar, and on this he said, v'lo bekesef tigalu, you will not be redeemed by silver. Ki dama be'inyanim mechartem legu'ulatam, shiu chotim bizman ha'gu'ula, kamo be'et ha'galut ve'amechira. Because it appeared that they would be the same at the time of their sale and their redemption, that the sins that they have at the redemption, at the point of redemption, would be the same as that point of exile and their sale being sold into slavery. Rabbeinu Ovadia Mibartanero, who lived at the same time as Don Yitzhak Abarbanel, in his commentary on Megillat Ruth, the Ovadia Mibartanero, Rabbeinu Ovadia, is most famous for his commentary on Mishnayos, but he also did write on certain parts of Tanakh. Ki Elai, to me, HaKadosh, it's talking about God. Hamalacha ligmor, meaning I, God, have to finish this work. V'ligol uloshia et benai, to redeem and to save my children. Aval gu'ula hamutelet alai hi rechoka, but the redemption that I have to do is far away. Ki kasha'ani goel, because when I redeem, ye im Yisrael yu reshayim v'lo ye behem zechut ligael, it will be that the people of Israel are evil and they do not have their own merits to cause the redemption. Elaseh leman shemi, but I will do it for my own sake. Aval yesh geula acheret, but nonetheless there is another possibility of redemption. Krova mihageula shali, and that is sooner than my redemption, the redemption that God will do without the merit of the Jewish people. Shehu, and that is she'aseh b'zechut Yisrael, that I, God, will do it in the merit of Israel. Im yashuvu b'tshuva, if they return in repentance. Shota geula efshar shetieh b'chol yom, and that redemption is possible every single day. Kamoshin Amar, as it says, Hayom im b'kolo tishma'u. Today you will be redeemed if you listen to God's voice. The Rabbeinu Ovadia Mibartanuro stresses this further along in his parish. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Yisrael, to the Jewish people, Be'echad mishnei panim efshar shetiga'el. It is possible to be redeemed in one of two ways. Or b'shvil ma'asecha hatovim, or because of your good deeds, or afal pi shiu ma'asecha ra'im, or even if your deeds are evil, to get el leman shemi. It is possible that you will be redeemed for my own merit. Also, Rabbi Yochanan ben Aaron Luria, in his Sefer Meshiv Nefesh on the Torah, writes a very similar statement. He was one of the great poskim from Alsace, as in Alsace-Lorraine, in the border between Germany and France, this region that went back and forth many times. He was considered one of the great Rabbanim of his generation, responding to questions from many, many places. So he wrote, Begulotenu ata, that now we are in our exile. Shenamar, as it says, Bita echishena, that in its time and quickly, Zachu echishena, lo zachu bita. If the Jewish people have merit, they will be redeemed immediately. If they do not have merit, they will be redeemed in their time. Imken sheminu keshegia ha'et afilu lo zachu niyeh ge'ulim. That we see from here that even though they do not merit it at the time when redemption is supposed to occur, that they will be redeemed at that point without any merit. Up to now, we have been quoting Rishonim. However, there is a similar line among the Achronim on various psukim and agadot and so on. And next week we will look at the Achronim on the process of redemption and whether it requires tshuva or not.